Here's something interesting. Some of the most genuinely gifted people you'll ever meet have absolutely no idea that they are. Not because they're being modest, not because they're hiding something, but because the very traits that make them exceptional also make them feel at times like something is wrong with them. That's the quiet paradox at the heart of giftedness. And today, we're going to unpack it not in the way you might expect. Not through IQ scores or academic achievements, but through the subtle psychological patterns that show up in everyday life. Patterns that researchers have been studying for decades. Patterns that often go completely unnoticed, even by the people who have them. So, if you've ever felt like your mind works a little differently, like you feel things more deeply than others seem to, like you're always searching for something just slightly out of reach, stay with this. Because what you're about to hear might explain a lot about yourself. The first sign is something psychologists call overexcitability. And no, that doesn't mean you're hyperactive or anxious. What it means is that your nervous system processes the world with greater intensity than average. The concept was developed by Polish psychologist Kazimierz Dabrowski, who noticed that gifted individuals tend to experience sensory, emotional, and intellectual stimulation far more deeply than others around them. For you, a piece of music doesn't just sound beautiful, it moves through you. An idea doesn't just interest you, it consumes you for days. A conversation doesn't just pass the time, it lingers in your mind long after it's over. This isn't sensitivity in the fragile sense. It's sensitivity in the deeply alive sense. And for many gifted people, this intensity has felt like a burden their entire lives, when actually it's a signal. The second sign is that you ask why constantly, and you always have. As a child, you probably drove adults slightly crazy with your questions. Not because you were being difficult, but because you genuinely needed to understand the reason behind things, not just the rule. And that hasn't changed. You find it almost impossible to accept information at surface level. You need to know the underlying mechanism, the deeper pattern, the real explanation. While others are satisfied with shortcuts, your mind keeps moving, pulling threads, tracing causes, refusing to stop at easy answers. Third, you've always felt slightly out of sync with the people around you. Not in an arrogant way, in a quietly lonely way. This is one of the most commonly reported experiences among gifted adults, and it's also one of the least talked about. You may notice that conversations sometimes feel too shallow, that jokes miss their mark, that your interests seem to orbit around ideas others rarely pause to consider. It's not that you think you're better than anyone. It's that, at times, you feel like you're tuned to a slightly different frequency, hearing signals that others don't always register. And when you spend years trying to tune yourself down to match the rhythm of others, something subtle begins to happen inside you. You don't just adjust your behavior, you start adjusting your expectations of yourself. That leads us into the next pattern, one that many gifted individuals carry quietly, often without realizing how deeply it shapes their inner world. You hold yourself to standards that most people around you cannot even see. This is often described as perfectionism, but not in the shallow sense of wanting things to look nice or polished. This is a deeper tension, a silent gap between the version of something you imagined in your mind and the version that finally exists in reality. You notice the missing details others overlook. You see the flaws before anyone has time to praise the effort. And even when people compliment your work, a quiet voice inside you is already listing the ways it could have been better. What looks like self-criticism from the outside is often the result of an unusually active form of self-awareness. Your mind doesn't just create, it evaluates, refines, questions, and revisits, sometimes long after everyone else has moved on. And over time, that level of awareness creates another subtle survival strategy. You learn how to hide parts of yourself. Not in dramatic ways, but in small daily adjustments that slowly become habit. You might slow down your speech so others can keep up. You might pretend not to understand something immediately, even when the answer is already clear to you. You might hold back questions, not because you lack curiosity, but because you've learned that asking too many can make people uncomfortable. Psychologists sometimes call this intellectual camouflage. It's the quiet art of blending in, of softening your edges so that your intensity doesn't draw unwanted attention. And the strange part is that after years of doing this, the mask can feel so natural that you forget it's there. But beneath that adaptation, another ability continues to grow, often unnoticed. Your mind begins making connections that others don't immediately see. Ideas that seem unrelated to most people form patterns in your thoughts. A conversation reminds you of a concept from years ago. A problem in one area suddenly unlocks a solution in another. This is known as divergent thinking, the ability to move across ideas in webs rather than lines. It can feel almost mysterious at times, like arriving at an answer without fully remembering the path that led you there. Yet beneath that mystery is a brain constantly scanning, linking, and synthesizing information in ways that are faster and deeper than average. And as your mind becomes skilled at seeing patterns, another sensitivity often develops alongside it, one that has less to do with ideas and more to do with values. You may notice that unfairness affects you more deeply than it seems to affect others. Not just major injustices, but small everyday moments where something feels off, unequal, or unkind. While others move past these moments quickly, you feel them linger. You replay them in your thoughts, searching for meaning, for resolution, for a sense that the world should make more sense than it sometimes does. That strong reaction to injustice isn't a weakness. It's often the sign of a deeply wired moral awareness, a mind that doesn't just process information, but evaluates the world through a powerful internal compass. And when your mind carries that kind of internal compass, constantly evaluating meaning and fairness, it also develops a powerful need for stimulation. Stillness, for you, rarely feels neutral. That leads to another pattern that many people misunderstand: your unusual relationship with boredom. For you, boredom isn't just an inconvenience. It can feel almost physical, like restlessness moving under your skin. When your environment doesn't offer enough challenge, your mind doesn't simply power down. It begins generating its own activity. You replay conversations, you imagine possibilities, you build scenarios that may never happen but feel necessary to explore. What others call distraction is often your brain searching urgently for something worthy of its attention. This is why routines that feel comfortable to others can feel suffocating to you. Your mind isn't broken, it is understimulated. And when a mind operates at that level of stimulation, emotions rarely stay shallow. They deepen, expand, and echo longer than expected. You may have been told at some point in your life that you're too sensitive, that you feel things too strongly, that you take things too personally. But emotional depth is not fragility. It is processing. When something meaningful happens, it doesn't pass through you quickly. It settles, layers itself into memory, and shapes how you interpret the world moving forward. A simple moment of kindness can stay with you for years. So can a careless word. Your emotional world is louder not because you're weak, but because your internal systems register more detail than most people notice. And yet, despite all of this intensity, the final pattern may be the most surprising. You often struggle to believe the compliments people give you. When others recognize your ability, you may feel a strange discomfort, as if they've mistaken you for someone more capable than you actually are. This is known as the imposter phenomenon, and it tends to run especially deep in minds that are constantly aware of their own limitations. The more you understand how much there is to learn, the harder it becomes to feel finished, accomplished, or certain. Instead of seeing your progress, you see the distance still left to travel. So here is the quiet truth that ties everything together. Giftedness, in its deepest sense, is not about perfection, achievement, or recognition. It is about a different relationship with the world, one built on intensity, curiosity, connection, and meaning. And if several of these patterns felt uncomfortably familiar, not flattering, but accurate, then perhaps the most important step forward is awareness. Awareness changes how you speak to yourself. Awareness changes how you interpret your past. Awareness changes what you allow yourself to become. And if this resonated with you, don't just move on and forget it. Pause for a moment. Think about which of these patterns has followed you the longest. Share this with someone who has always felt a little different, but never had the language to explain why. And if you're ready to understand your own mind at a deeper level, stay with this journey. Because the more clearly you see the shape of your thinking, the more powerfully you can begin to shape your life.